Good morning, everyone, and welcome to University Unitarian Church in Seattle, Washington. It's Sunday, February the 7th, and we are delighted you can join us for our morning service. My name is Jon Luopa. I'm one of the ministers here with my colleague Beth Chronister, our musicians and tech crew. Just two announcements. This coming week on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we will have one of our monthly Vespers service. This week, the service will be led by Janine Larson, who is the Director of Ministries here at University Church. This will be primarily a meditation-based service, and we invite you and encourage you to bring a friend if you can. Next Sunday is our annual high school service, so Melody Moberg, our Director of Religious Education, and Reverend Beth will be working with the youth for that service. Let us begin our service this morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I call us to worship this morning with these words from Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness it, to notice each thing so that each thing gets noticed. Together we notice not only each mountain shadow and each stone on the beach, but we notice each other's beautiful face in complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Welcome to University Unitarian Church. Welcome to worship together. From wherever you are, it is good to be together. Will you please join now in singing our doxology, followed by hymn number 22, Dear Weaver of Our Lives' Design.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, on every tongue. Dear weaver of our lives' design, whose patterns I'll obey, with skillful fingers gently guide our sturdy threads that will survive the tangle of our days. Take up the fabric of our lives with hands that gently hold, binding the ragged edge that tear would sunder and that pain would tear, and mend the raveling souls. Let eyes that in the plainest cloth a hidden beauty see, discern in us our richest hues, show us the patterns we may use to set our spirits free.
We came to UUC shortly after moving to Seattle, almost, 20 years ago. We knew we really wanted a place outside of our careers, someplace that we can continue to grow and push ourselves. And that desire expanded even, after we had our kids, and we definitely found our place here at UUC.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things I've really valued about UUC is that it's a community of diverse thinkers who have common shared principles and values, but different ways of approaching that. That it's a place to raise and support young people in our quest for social justice in action, with opportunities for leadership and activism for them. And both of our daughters have volunteered and been a part of that to some degree throughout their time at UUC. And then the sermons and the services really give us food for thought each week. And to me, it's sometimes a bit like yoga. I don't always feel like going, but I feel really good when I've gone and feel like I've gained something and I'm really fulfilled.
Yeah, I think to build on that, UUC is not just a physical space. It's really spiritual, and it's also a philosophical space as well. We continually appreciate those sermons and programs and other community members always continuing to challenge us and push us. It really motivates us in how we approach the world and really help to make it a better place.
So we've chosen to give an evergreen pledge so that's just kind of part of our lives. It's sustained, it's easy. To us, that just makes a lot of sense to kind of build that in.
Would you please join me now in saying the words of our offering we speak each week? This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. For our prayer and meditation this morning, I share with you this prayer for humility. And I want to start with a note about linguistics, which is also a metaphor and image, is that humility linguistically shares a root with humus, the soil of the earth, which also shares a root with human. And so I invite you to connect in your own way with being of the earth, being close to earth, close to soil, as we enter into this moment of prayer together. great mystery, known by many names and no names. Humble me and bring me down to rest on the earth, so that I might be renewed and become right-sized once more. Guide my body and soul back to the ground of all being, so that I might begin to discern the difference between the source and the ego. Open my senses so that I might once again inhabit a childlike wonder of life. Make awe my prayer, pausing to notice my praise and gratitude my glory song. Release my grip on certainty and turn my gaze upon the infinite libraries of knowledge, story, and truth that run rampant through this universe. Open my fist and release the fear in my heart, so that forgiveness might flow through me. Each day aspiring to be one who forgives, each day acknowledging my need to be forgiven. Open my ears so that I may hear the complexity and contradictions of a changing creation, and listen attentively for the pluralism, particularities, and paradoxes within people, including within myself. When I might distance myself from others by way of sympathy or self-righteousness, help awaken in me the spiritual practices of curiosity and compassion. Do not let me lose my convictions, but neither let me hold them so tightly that they cannot grow and move and breathe. Do not let me lose my convictions, but neither let them become idolatry or a fortress wall through which connection is impossible. Humble me, so that I might return to the earth and remember the shared origin of all life. To these words, I invite you to add the silent prayers and meditations of your own hearts. Blessed be, and Amen.
I walk the unfrequented road with open eye and ear. I watch a field of farmer load the bounty of the year. I filch the fruit of no one's toil, no trespasser am I. And yet I reap from every soil, and from the boundless sky. I gather where I did not sow, and bind the mystic sheaf. The amber where the rivers flow, the rustle of the leaf. A beauty springtime never knew, until the quiet ways, and sweeter shines the landscape through its veil of autumn haze. I face the hills, the stream, the wood, and feel with all akin. My heart expands their fortitude, and peace and joy flow in.
When I was new to ministry, I paid close attention to many of my older colleagues and looking for those who might be mentors and ministers who might try to imitate as I grew into my ministerial vocation. And there certainly were those older ministers who were very special indeed, and I watched them closely, and as you might also expect, there were other ministers who I chose not to watch very closely, indeed wished to pay no attention to them at all. One of those ministers was a very prolific writer. He's now deceased and was very popular in his own time in Unitarian Universalist circles, but I didn't like much what he had written. You can imagine my great embarrassment many, many years later when I was the chaplain at a Unitarian Universalist conference, which required me to give morning and evening chapel talks. And at the end of the week, the daughter of that minister I last referenced came up to me and said, "You know, of all the ministers I've listened to since my dad has died, you are the closest one to him than any other minister I've heard." Well, how about that? It goes to show you the limitation of judgment. But I want to share a part of one of his readings as I open my sermon this morning. And the title of it is The Acceptance of Mystery. And the minister was Ken Patton. There are questions which come to every person in feelings of wastelands and loneliness, beyond the healing of known companions. For want of answers, our minds have splintered, and we have wandered off into the ecstasy of madness. Many have stifled these voices, drowning them in hurry and noise. Some listen again and again, until the yearning unknown is itself known and familiar. These become the depth and body of the sea, the lifting presence beneath the keels of their vessels. They make of the mysteries a song and a story. They are taught the ways of acceptance and peace. I think most of us make a general assumption that we all think and feel and understand alike. I know I make this presumption all the time. When I try to explain something to another person, perhaps an idea that is perfectly obvious to me, I try in 3 or 4 different ways to make it just as plain and obvious as words can make it. And if the other person doesn't see it, my only defense is to turn away and say, "How dense can you be? Come on." Many times, when someone has tried to explain something to me and I cannot understand what they are trying to tell me, I am sure that they are thinking likewise of me. And indeed, they often say so. We always assume that if we both look at a similar or same object, you and I are going to see the same thing, and we don't. It is utterly impossible for 2 people to see the same object in the same way. And if that simple, thoroughly scientific, acceptable fact were accepted by us and used in our living, what a difference it would make. We should never make the assumption of identity. We should always understand that however obvious anything is to me, it looks different to another person. My mother was the president of a large credit union in Massachusetts attached to the steel mill in that city. They were robbed on numerous occasions, and on one of those occasions, when the police came to interview the tellers at the counter, of course they asked, "Would you describe the person who came in and held up the credit union?" "Of course I can," said one teller. "He had a red jacket." "No, he didn't have a red jacket. It was really orange." "Are you kidding me? It was a black jacket. It wasn't red or orange." Now all 3 of them were held up by the same person with a multicolored jacket. Okay. Why does this happen? Because each of us is different, and we are accustomed to this fact on one level, but we often lose the significance of it, that no 2 persons, as far as we can tell, are identical. Each person is unique. No other person like you. This is a fact not to be lightly accepted. But what does this dissimilarity mean? It means that you stand alone. I stand alone. Each of us does. Alone in the history of the universe as an individual person. No other human being has felt the same way you feel or thought the way you think. No other person has ever responded to his or her parents, to their environment in the way you have responded to your parents, to your environment. Your stimuli are different. No other person has ever had exactly the same influence played upon him or her that you have had played upon you. And so we each of us stand in a way unalterably alone in the history of life on this planet, so far as can be determined. You stand alone as an individual in the way you think, in the way you feel and act. And why do we rush wisely by these unique individual differences? Well, let's develop that just a little. You stand alone in your needs. No one needs exactly what you need. Your children do not need what you need, nor want what you want. You stand alone in your decisions, and this is one of the most terrifying aspects of human life, it seems to me. Whenever you have to make an important decision, you can run around from person to person looking for help, and they'll gladly offer you help, I'm sure. But in the end, you have to make that decision by yourself. So we stand alone in our decisions and in our consciences. We often run to the crowd for support and lose ourselves. We surround ourselves with people who make the same kind of choices as we do, seemingly. We make a bad decision, and we find other people who've made the same bad decision, and we feel that we are just like them. It's not my fault, we might say. When we get into trouble, we put the blame on some other person, always running away from ourselves, you see, and our uniqueness, because the burden of standing alone is pretty tremendous. But you cannot run away from yourself. You know it when you have tried to lose yourself in the largest crowd, and on some level you feel that you are just you. You know in your heart of hearts that you are responsible, that no matter how much your background or other people may have contributed to your negligence or delinquency, you stand up as an individual and take responsibility for yourself. Or you should, or we should. You're alone in your conscience, that sacred space, and all of the great religious traditions of the world have this as foundational in their ethical teachings. As a child, I was taught that I was accountable to God. And while this language is understood differently today by me so many decades later, the message was clear. The message was, I am a responsible self. I am accountable, and I stand alone in my accountability. What it means then is that every one of us must find that before which he or she or they are accountable. Can you feel the enormous significance of such a question? It is a central part of the religious search, but tricky, because we have to be accountable on its terms and not only on my terms. Every person must find this source of judgment or measure. It's easy to say, shamelessly easy to say, but then when someone we love is in need of help, our reaction is to tell that person how to solve their problem. Let someone you don't even know come into your office to talk to you about a dilemma they face, and you'll say, look, this is what you need to do right now. Stop crying. This is what you need to do right now. And you might share with that person how you found your own way, but this is a different person, and it will not be clear to them. And anyway, how do you know what you would do if you were in their position? Can you answer that question? How do you know what you would do if you were some other person than yourself, with an entirely different background and heritage and training, with an entirely different response to the stimuli in their life? And the absurdity of this can be quite maddening. But we assume, for example, that this person is married and has children, and they walk like a married person, and they talk like a married person, and they work and eat and love like a married person, just like every married person. And that's pretty tragic, I think, because that person is different, and he or she or they must find their own way with their own resources, you see. You may think it is perfectly ridiculous the way in which that person is conducting their own life, but that is the person who must find its way and do the trying, not in your way, but in theirs. What follows from this is the realization that while it is almost automatic and even at times necessary, it is always treacherous to make judgments on other people. Almost always treacherous to judge another person. And that also is a foundational belief in all of the great religious traditions of the world. Centuries and centuries and centuries before we discovered and appreciated the uniqueness of the individual person and could support it with philosophical and scientific evidence, great religions have warned us of the perils of judgment. Why did this person kill that person? How do we know? Well, we need to get it straight for the record so that no one slips through the loophole. Someone's got to be punished for this. We pass laws which state certain things not to be tolerated, will be punished with certain kinds of punishment, and we pass judgment on the act in relationship to these laws. But do we really ever know why that person did what they did? Can we presume that a human being is so transparent that we can say why they did it? How do we know what pressures existed in that person's life, especially as we are barely cognizant of the factors in our own lives? How do you know what another person would do? What pressures they have? What drives and compels them? What kind of a brain they may have? What tradition taught them? Their training, their education. You might say, of course, I would never do that. I've caught myself saying, I would never do that, and have often surprised myself with realizing there have been instances when I probably would do the same thing. We stand uniquely alone. And while we must secure some basic standard of safety and well-being if we are to live together, I appreciate that. But I am not talking about the outline of a social contract, but I am talking in terms of human understanding and its spiritual parameters. And here each of us stands in our own conscience. Is it possible for us to accept this lonely quality in our experience? Is it possible to find a way to cherish our existence as worthwhile, legitimate, adequate, and do so with other people? Life contains sufficient mystery to keep us ever wrestling with our place in it. Why did the world in its totality come into existence? Why are we confronted by this stupendous and indifferent order of things and events? What is the purpose of life? Who am I, really? Who am I? What is the message that is embedded in organic and inorganic matter? And what does the great challenge reaching me from beyond the fringes of the universe mean? How can I be filled with awe and fullness and humility and insignificance concurrently? It seems to me that we ask these questions not so much as to know the answers, to exert our intellectual power over things, but we ask these questions to become known to ourselves. Not so much to direct and shape others as to allow ourselves to be confronted and challenged by life and to find our way through it and to make it as meaningful as possible. How often are we saying to each other, "Don't do that. Don't believe such nonsense. Don't move. Don't take that job. You're really a fool. You can't make up your mind. You're not a good enough athlete. You don't read the right books. You're too rigid. Don't leave that marriage." How many illustrations would one need to offer in these perfectly homely, casual things that this past week you have probably said in a dozen different ways? Who are you to tell the other person what they ought to do and how they ought to live? One last illustration, friends, if you're still with me, and then you take it from here. I had a cousin who had a terrible feeling of inferiority all his life. And he expressed this inferiority by being boastful and swaggering. And his front to other people was one of absolute confidence, you see. And he was arrogant. And he decided the fates of his children and any other person who crossed his path. And I have been saying that this kind of thing is wrong, you see. We ought not to do it. But once at a family gathering, another relative took him to task. And that relative deflated my cousin as a pin deflates a balloon. And he was squashed. And that relative had no right to take away my cousin's defense. Was it not the only way in which he could hold on? Who was he to tell my cousin that he shouldn't find his life and hold to it? This kind of psychological defense is not the only one we use, but it is one of them. And we all have defenses. Be very careful that you do not take away somebody else's defense from them in the name of your superior wisdom and knowledge. Do not be so quick to judge a fellow suffering human being, because we all go to hell in our own way. Why don't we have more faith in the uniqueness of each person? Do we have so little capacity for objectivity and wonder and humility? And why don't we have more faith that life will work its way in every one of us? Life is a gift which we hold but for a while. It is fraught with twists and storms, betrayals, mercies, inspirations, revelations, hidden treasures before me and within. And yes, it was not until I could appreciate this fact as an adult that I could seek to meaningfully participate in a community of persons, a community in which I still stand alone, but not as one who knows, but as one who is known. Standing alone, as my mentor said so long ago, in the mystery of others, standing alone together. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is hymn number 6.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet I said yes to love.
Let us take much of love into all the struggles of life, and when the recall sounds and the shadows fall, may we have hearts unembittered by all we have suffered, and uncorrupted by all we have enjoyed, and be at the last remembered and cherished as those who lived boldly. Amen.